Question 1. The performance metrics show that a key supplier, Innovate Solutions, is consistently meeting delivery targets and quality standards, but their financial health has recently deteriorated. During a routine supplier visit, the primary contact at Innovate Solutions, who has been instrumental in maintaining this positive performance, offers you a significant personal gift as a token of appreciation for your support. This offer is not part of any formal supplier incentive program and is made privately. What is the most ethical and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Inform the supplier that while you appreciate the gesture, you cannot accept it, but suggest they explore alternative ways to demonstrate their commitment that do not involve personal benefits. Option B. Discreetly accept the personal gift and avoid mentioning it to anyone within the organization to prevent potential misunderstandings. Option C. Accept the personal gift, considering it a gesture of goodwill that will not influence future decisions, and continue business as usual. Option D. Politely decline the personal gift and immediately report the offer to your supervisor or the company's ethics compliance officer. Correct answer is D. Politely decline the personal gift and immediately report the offer to your supervisor or the company's ethics compliance officer. Explanation. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in supply management, where a supplier, facing financial difficulties, offers a personal benefit to the supply manager. The challenge lies in balancing the organization's need for reliable suppliers with the imperative to maintain ethical conduct and avoid conflicts of interest. The supply manager must navigate this situation with integrity, adhering to professional standards and organizational policies. The correct approach involves politely but firmly declining the personal benefit and reporting the offer to the appropriate internal authority, such as a supervisor or ethics officer. This upholds the principles of integrity and objectivity central to supply management. By refusing the gift and disclosing the situation, the supply manager demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and prevents any perception of impropriety or undue influence on future sourcing decisions. This aligns with the ethical guidelines that prohibit accepting gifts that could compromise professional judgment or create a conflict of interest. An incorrect approach would be to accept the personal benefit. This directly violates ethical codes that prohibit accepting gifts that could influence business decisions or create a conflict of interest. It undermines the integrity of the procurement process and could lead to accusations of favoritism or corruption. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the offer and continue business as usual without reporting it. This failure to disclose creates a hidden conflict of interest and leaves the organization vulnerable to potential ethical breaches. It demonstrates a lack of transparency and a disregard for established ethical protocols. A further incorrect approach would be to accept the benefit and rationalize it as a minor gesture or a sign of goodwill. This rationalization is a dangerous form of self-deception that bypasses ethical considerations and can lead to a slippery slope of increasingly compromised decisions. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a clear understanding of ethical boundaries, a commitment to transparency, and the courage to act with integrity, even when it is personally inconvenient. Professionals should consult their organization's code of conduct and ethical guidelines, and when in doubt, seek guidance from their superiors or ethics department. Question 2. The control framework reveals that a supply chain organization is experiencing consistent delays in order fulfillment, leading to potential breaches of contractual lead time agreements. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance and sound supply management principles for addressing this issue? Option A. Prioritize supplier requests for extended lead times to reduce immediate pressure on internal operations, even if it means consistently missing original delivery commitments. Option B. Implement a system for accurately measuring and reporting actual order fulfillment lead times, identifying root causes of delays, and collaboratively developing corrective actions with suppliers and internal teams to establish realistic and achievable revised lead time targets. Option C. Focus on expediting all delayed orders through premium shipping methods, regardless of the underlying reasons for the delay, to meet immediate customer demands. Option D. Adjust the reported lead time metrics to reflect the expedited delivery times achieved on a few select orders, thereby masking the systemic fulfillment issues. The correct answer is B. Implement a system for accurately measuring and reporting actual order fulfillment lead times, identifying root causes of delays, and collaboratively developing corrective actions with suppliers and internal teams to establish realistic and achievable revised lead time targets. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with regulatory compliance in a critical supply chain function. Mismanaging order fulfillment and lead time metrics can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of customer trust, all of which are directly impacted by adherence to supply management principles and relevant regulations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen metrics and their application align with both business objectives and the legal and ethical standards governing supply chain operations. The correct approach involves establishing clear, measurable, and achievable lead time targets that are communicated effectively to all stakeholders, including suppliers and internal departments. This approach is right because it directly supports the foundational principles of supply management, which emphasize transparency, accountability, and continuous improvement. By setting realistic expectations and monitoring performance against these, organizations can proactively identify and address bottlenecks, thereby ensuring compliance with contractual obligations and regulatory requirements related to timely delivery. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of breaches in service-level agreements and avoids potential legal ramifications stemming from consistent non-performance, which could be viewed as a failure to uphold contractual duties. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on expediting orders without considering the root causes of delays fails to address systemic issues. This can lead to increased costs and potentially compromise quality, creating new compliance risks related to product standards or safety. It also neglects the importance of accurate lead time forecasting, which is crucial for regulatory reporting and contractual adherence. Another incorrect approach that involves manipulating lead time data to present a more favorable performance picture is ethically unsound and constitutes a direct violation of regulatory principles related to accurate record-keeping and fair business practices. Such deception undermines trust with partners and can lead to severe legal consequences if discovered, including fines and sanctions for misrepresentation. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes supplier convenience over customer delivery commitments disregards the fundamental responsibility of the supply manager to ensure the timely flow of goods and services to the end customer. This can lead to breaches of contract and regulatory noncompliance if service-level agreements are not met, potentially exposing the organization to legal action and reputational harm. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape governing supply chain operations, including any specific requirements related to order fulfillment and delivery timelines. This understanding should be coupled with a robust internal control framework that defines clear performance metrics, establishes accountability, and promotes transparent communication. Professionals should always strive to implement solutions that are not only operationally efficient, but also ethically sound and legally compliant, fostering long-term sustainability and trust within the supply chain. Question 3. Market research demonstrates that organizations are increasingly focused on demonstrating the strategic value of their supply management functions. A supply manager is tasked with identifying and implementing new key performance indicators, KPI, to measure and report on the department's effectiveness. Considering the foundational principles of supply management and the need for accurate, actionable performance measurement, which of the following approaches to selecting these new KPIs would be most professionally sound and ethically defensible? Option A. Focus on KPIs that measure transactional volume, such as the number of requisitions processed, to demonstrate high levels of activity within the department. Option B. Prioritize KPIs that are easily quantifiable and can be reported with minimal effort, even if they do not fully capture the strategic impact of supply management activities. Option C. Choose KPIs that are heavily influenced by external market forces, such as global commodity price trends, without establishing clear internal control measures or mitigation strategies. Option D. Select KPIs that are directly linked to the organization's strategic objectives and provide actionable insights into areas such as cost savings, supplier performance, and risk mitigation. The correct answer is B. Prioritize KPIs that are easily quantifiable and can be reported with minimal effort, even if they do not fully capture the strategic impact of supply management activities. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a supply manager to balance the need for performance measurement with the potential for misinterpretation and misuse of key performance indicators, KPI. Pressure to demonstrate improvement can lead to selecting KPIs that are easily manipulated or do not reflect true supply chain health, potentially masking underlying issues. Careful judgment is required to ensure KPIs are meaningful, aligned with strategic objectives, and ethically reported. The correct approach involves selecting KPIs that are directly tied to strategic goals and provide actionable insights into supply chain performance, such as on-time delivery, cost savings achieved through strategic sourcing, and supplier quality ratings. This aligns with the principles of responsible supply management, which emphasizes transparency, accountability, and continuous improvement. By focusing on these types of KPIs, the supply manager can provide a realistic and valuable assessment of the function's contribution to the organization's success, adhering to ethical standards of reporting and performance evaluation. An incorrect approach would be to focus solely on easily quantifiable metrics that may not reflect overall value, such as the number of purchase orders processed. This fails to provide a comprehensive view of supply management's impact and can incentivize transactional efficiency over strategic value creation. Ethically, this approach can be misleading as it presents a narrow and potentially inflated view of performance. Another incorrect approach is to select KPIs that are heavily influenced by external factors beyond the supply manager's control, such as commodity price fluctuations, without also measuring the organization's ability to mitigate these risks. This can lead to inaccurate performance assessments and a lack of accountability for areas where the supply manager can actually influence outcomes. This approach lacks professional integrity as it attributes performance to factors that are not directly managed. A further incorrect approach is to choose KPIs that are not clearly defined or understood by stakeholders, leading to confusion and distrust. Without clear definitions and consistent measurement methodologies, KPIs lose their value as performance indicators and can become a source of conflict. This violates the principle of clear communication and transparency essential for effective supply management. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes the strategic alignment and actionable nature of KPIs. This involves understanding the organization's overarching goals, identifying key drivers of supply chain success, and selecting metrics that directly measure progress against these drivers. Regular review and validation of KPIs with stakeholders are crucial to ensure their continued relevance and accuracy. Question 4. The performance metrics show a sustained increase in both supplier lead times and the cost of carrying excess inventory. Considering the historical evolution of supply management from a transactional purchasing function to a strategic business process, which of the following approaches is most likely to effectively address these interconnected issues? Option A. Implementing a strategic sourcing methodology that analyzes total cost of ownership, supplier capabilities, and supply chain risks to optimize supplier relationships and procurement processes. Option B. Initiating aggressive price renegotiations with all current suppliers to immediately reduce per unit costs, assuming this will indirectly improve lead times. Option C. Attributing the performance issues solely to unfavorable market conditions and waiting for external factors to improve. Option D. Deploying a new inventory management software system without a prior assessment of the underlying procurement process inefficiencies. The correct answer is A. Implementing a strategic sourcing methodology that analyzes total cost of ownership, supplier capabilities, and supply chain risks to optimize supplier relationships and procurement processes. Explanation. The performance metrics show a significant increase in lead times and a corresponding rise in inventory carrying costs, indicating a potential breakdown in the historical effectiveness of the organization's procurement processes. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a supply chain professional to not only identify the symptoms of a problem, but also to diagnose its root cause by considering the evolution of supply management practices. A deep understanding of the historical context of supply management is crucial for distinguishing between a temporary fluctuation and a systemic issue that may stem from an outdated approach. The correct approach involves recognizing that modern supply management has evolved from a purely transactional purchasing function to a strategic, integrated process focused on value creation and risk mitigation. This evolution, driven by factors like globalization, technological advancements, and increased complexity necessitates a shift from simply seeking the lowest price to fostering collaborative relationships, optimizing total cost of ownership, and ensuring supply chain resilience. Adopting a strategic sourcing methodology, which considers the entire life cycle of a product or service and its impact on the organization's competitive advantage, aligns with this historical progression and is the most effective way to address the observed performance issues. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes long-term organizational health and stakeholder value over short-term cost savings, and it is compliant with the foundational principles of responsible supply management that emphasize efficiency and effectiveness. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on immediate cost reduction through aggressive price negotiations with existing suppliers. This reflects an outdated purchasing mindset that predates the strategic evolution of supply management. Such an approach fails to address the underlying causes of increased lead times and inventory costs, potentially damaging supplier relationships and overlooking opportunities for process improvement or innovation. Ethically, this could lead to supplier exploitation and a failure to uphold principles of fair dealing. Another incorrect approach would be to blame external market conditions without conducting a thorough internal analysis of procurement processes. While market forces are a factor, a professional supply manager must first exhaust internal diagnostic capabilities. This approach neglects the historical shift towards proactive supply chain management and internal process optimization, which is a cornerstone of modern supply management. It represents a failure to take responsibility for the supply chain's performance and an abdication of professional duty. A third incorrect approach would be to implement a new technology solution without first understanding the historical context of the existing problems and the strategic objectives. While technology is an enabler, it is not a panacea. Implementing technology without a clear understanding of how it fits into the evolved landscape of supply management and addresses specific, historically rooted issues can lead to wasted investment and further inefficiencies. This approach overlooks the strategic integration that characterizes contemporary supply management. Professionals should approach such situations by first conducting a comprehensive diagnostic that considers the historical evolution of their supply management practices. This involves analyzing current performance against historical benchmarks and understanding how the organization's procurement and supply chain strategies have adapted or failed to adapt to industry changes. The decision-making process should then involve evaluating potential solutions through the lens of strategic alignment, total cost of ownership, risk management, and the long-term value proposition, rather than solely focusing on immediate cost savings. This ensures that interventions are not only effective in addressing symptoms, but also contribute to building a more resilient and strategically advantageous supply chain. Question 5. Compliance review shows that a supply manager is responsible for evaluating bids for a critical component. One of the bidding suppliers is owned by the supply manager's sibling. The supply manager has a close personal relationship with their sibling and is aware of the sibling's financial struggles. How should the supply manager proceed to ensure ethical conduct and uphold professional standards? Option A. Subtly adjust the evaluation criteria to favor the sibling's company, believing this will help their sibling and not significantly harm the organization. Option B. Disclose the personal relationship to their supervisor and recuse themselves from all aspects of the evaluation and selection process for this supplier. Option C. Proceed with the evaluation, ensuring the bid is treated fairly, and make a recommendation based on the best overall value for the organization. Option D. Ignore the personal relationship and complete the evaluation and recommendation process without mentioning it to anyone, assuming impartiality. Correct answer is B. Disclose the personal relationship to their supervisor and recuse themselves from all aspects of the evaluation and selection process for this supplier. Explanation. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in supply management, where personal relationships could potentially influence professional judgment and procurement decisions. The challenge lies in maintaining objectivity and fairness while navigating existing social connections. Adherence to ethical codes and professional standards is paramount to ensure trust, integrity, and compliance with organizational policies and relevant regulations. The correct approach involves transparently disclosing the personal relationship to the appropriate authority within the organization and recusing oneself from any decision-making processes related to the supplier. This upholds the principle of avoiding conflicts of interest, a cornerstone of ethical conduct in supply management. Professional standards, such as those outlined by the Institute for Supply Management (ISM) for CPSM certification, emphasize integrity, objectivity, and fairness in all business dealings. By disclosing and recusing, the supply professional demonstrates a commitment to these principles, preventing any perception of favoritism and ensuring that supplier selection is based solely on merit, value, and organizational needs. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the evaluation and recommendation without disclosing the relationship, even if the intention is to remain impartial. This creates a significant risk of perceived bias, undermining the integrity of the procurement process and potentially violating organizational policies against conflicts of interest. Such an action erodes trust among stakeholders and could lead to reputational damage for both the individual and the organization. Another incorrect approach is to subtly steer the evaluation towards the favored supplier, rationalizing that the relationship does not inherently mean unfairness. This is a direct breach of ethical conduct, as it involves manipulating the process to benefit a personal connection, thereby compromising objectivity and fairness. It violates the fundamental duty to act in the best interest of the organization. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to ignore the relationship and hope it goes unnoticed. This passive stance is ethically irresponsible. It fails to proactively address a potential conflict of interest and leaves the organization vulnerable to accusations of impropriety if the relationship is discovered later. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a proactive and transparent approach, prioritizing ethical obligations and organizational integrity above personal comfort or convenience. A structured decision-making process would involve identifying the potential conflict, consulting relevant ethical guidelines and organizational policies, seeking advice from supervisors or ethics officers, and taking decisive action to mitigate the risk, such as disclosure and recusal. Question 6. The control framework reveals that a department manager requests a new software system, stating it must have advanced reporting capabilities. The supply management professional's task is to initiate the procurement process. Which of the following approaches best ensures that the organization procures a solution that truly meets its needs? Option A. Schedule a meeting with the department manager and key end users to discuss specific business problems the reporting capabilities are intended to solve, the types of data required, and how the reports will be used to drive decisions. Option B. Immediately solicit bids from vendors known for robust reporting features, prioritizing the lowest cost proposal. Option C. Ask the manager for a list of specific report names they want, and then find a vendor that can provide those exact reports, regardless of broader system functionality. Option D. Proceed with procuring a widely adopted software solution that has a reputation for good reporting, assuming it will meet the manager's needs. The correct answer is B. Immediately solicit bids from vendors known for robust reporting features, prioritizing the lowest cost proposal. Explanation. The control framework reveals that understanding user requirements is a foundational element of effective supply management, particularly within the context of the Certified Professional in Supply Management, CPSM Module 1, Foundation of Supply Management. This scenario is professionally challenging because a misalignment between stated user needs and actual operational requirements can lead to significant inefficiencies, cost overruns, and ultimately, failure to achieve organizational objectives. Careful judgment is required to move beyond superficial requests and uncover the underlying business drivers and constraints. The correct approach involves a systematic process of eliciting, documenting, and validating user requirements. This includes engaging directly with stakeholders, employing active listening techniques, asking clarifying questions, and potentially using tools like needs analysis matrices or process mapping to gain a comprehensive understanding. This approach aligns with ethical principles of diligence and competence, ensuring that supply management decisions are based on accurate and complete information, thereby serving the best interests of the organization. It also implicitly supports the principles of good governance and accountability by ensuring that resources are procured for legitimate and well-defined purposes. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the lowest bid without a thorough understanding of user requirements fails to meet the organization's actual needs. This can lead to the procurement of goods or services that are inadequate, incompatible, or require costly modifications, violating the principle of providing value and potentially leading to financial waste. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of procurement over requirement validation risks acquiring unsuitable items, which can disrupt operations and damage the organization's reputation. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to act in the organization's best interest. A third incorrect approach that relies on assumptions or past practices without revalidating current needs ignores the dynamic nature of business and can result in procuring outdated or irrelevant solutions, again failing to deliver optimal value and potentially leading to obsolescence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear definition of the problem or opportunity. This involves actively seeking to understand the why behind a request, not just the what. Techniques such as stakeholder interviews, workshops, and requirement gathering sessions are crucial. The gathered information should then be documented and reviewed with stakeholders for confirmation. This iterative process ensures that the final requirements are accurate, complete, and actionable, forming a solid basis for procurement decisions. Question 7. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a key supplier for critical components has shown a decline in on-time delivery rates over the past 2 quarters, but their pricing remains highly competitive. The supply manager needs to evaluate this supplier's overall performance to decide on contract renewal. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of effective and ethical supply management as taught in CPSM Module 1? Option A. Terminate the contract immediately due to the decline in on-time delivery without further investigation into other performance aspects. Option B. Rely on informal conversations with internal users of the components to gauge their satisfaction with the supplier's performance. Option C. Continue the contract based solely on the supplier's consistently low pricing, assuming the delivery issues are temporary and minor. Option D. Establish a balanced scorecard that incorporates on-time delivery, quality defect rates, responsiveness to inquiries, and a review of their ethical sourcing practices. The correct answer is D. Establish a balanced scorecard that incorporates on-time delivery, quality defect rates, responsiveness to inquiries, and a review of their ethical sourcing practices. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for objective supplier performance data with the potential for subjective bias and the risk of misinterpreting performance metrics. The supply manager must navigate the complexities of data collection, analysis, and the impact of these metrics on critical business decisions, such as supplier selection and contract renewals. The challenge lies in ensuring that the chosen metrics are truly indicative of performance and that their application is fair and consistent, adhering to ethical sourcing principles and the foundational tenets of supply management as outlined in the CPSM framework. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves establishing a balanced scorecard that incorporates a diverse range of supplier performance metrics, including both quantitative and qualitative factors. This approach is right because it provides a holistic view of supplier capabilities, moving beyond simple cost or delivery timelines. By including metrics like quality adherence, innovation contributions, ethical compliance, and responsiveness, the supply manager aligns with the CPSM emphasis on strategic sourcing and responsible supply chain management. This comprehensive evaluation method minimizes the risk of overlooking critical performance aspects and ensures decisions are based on a well-rounded understanding of supplier value, thereby upholding ethical sourcing and fair dealing principles. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that solely focuses on the lowest price offered by a supplier is ethically flawed and professionally unsound. While cost is a factor, prioritizing it above all other performance indicators can lead to compromised quality, unreliable delivery, and potential ethical breaches if the low price is achieved through unsustainable or unethical labor practices. This approach fails to consider the total cost of ownership and the long-term value a supplier brings, which is a core principle of effective supply management. An approach that relies exclusively on anecdotal feedback from internal stakeholders without structured data collection or verification is also professionally unacceptable. Anecdotal evidence can be subjective, prone to bias, and may not represent the supplier's overall performance. This method lacks the objectivity and consistency required for fair evaluation and can lead to unfair judgments, potentially damaging supplier relationships and overlooking systemic performance issues or strengths. an approach that only considers metrics readily available through automated systems, ignoring critical qualitative aspects like communication effectiveness or problem-solving capabilities, is incomplete. While automated data is valuable, it often fails to capture the nuances of a supplier relationship. This limited perspective can lead to misjudgments about a supplier's true partnership potential and their ability to adapt to changing business needs, thus not fully meeting the strategic objectives of supply management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic and data-driven approach to supplier performance management. This involves defining clear, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART, objectives for supplier performance. The process should include establishing a balanced set of metrics that cover operational, financial, and strategic aspects, ensuring both quantitative and qualitative data are collected and analyzed. Regular performance reviews, transparent communication with suppliers, and a mechanism for addressing performance gaps are crucial. Professionals must always consider the ethical implications of their evaluation methods, ensuring fairness, objectivity, and adherence to organizational policies and industry best practices as emphasized in the CPSM framework. Question 8. The assessment process reveals that the procurement team is developing a new sourcing strategy for a critical component. The engineering department has expressed concerns about potential quality compromises due to cost reduction targets, while the finance department is focused solely on achieving the lowest possible unit price. The marketing department is concerned about potential supply chain disruptions impacting product launch timelines. Which approach best exemplifies effective cross-functional collaboration and integration in this scenario? Option A. The procurement team develops the sourcing strategy independently, focusing on cost reduction, and then presents it to the other departments for a perfunctory review. Option B. The procurement team leads a series of workshops with engineering, finance, and marketing to collaboratively define acceptable quality thresholds, cost targets, and risk mitigation strategies, ensuring all departmental concerns are addressed in the final sourcing strategy. Option C. The procurement team proceeds with the sourcing strategy based on the finance department's primary objective of achieving the lowest unit price, assuming engineering and marketing will adapt to any resulting challenges. Option D. The procurement team prioritizes the engineering department's quality concerns, potentially leading to higher costs, without fully integrating the financial implications or marketing's timeline sensitivities. The correct answer is B. The procurement team leads a series of workshops with engineering, finance, and marketing to collaboratively define acceptable quality thresholds, cost targets, and risk mitigation strategies, ensuring all departmental concerns are addressed in the final sourcing strategy. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply management, achieving effective cross-functional collaboration when different departments have competing priorities and perspectives. The professional challenge lies in navigating these differing viewpoints to achieve an optimal outcome for the organization, rather than just for individual departments. Careful judgment is required to balance departmental needs with overarching strategic goals, and to ensure that decisions are made ethically and in compliance with organizational policies and relevant regulations. The correct approach involves actively seeking input from all relevant departments, facilitating open communication, and establishing a shared understanding of project goals and constraints. This collaborative process ensures that potential issues are identified early, diverse expertise is leveraged, and buy-in is secured from all stakeholders. This aligns with the ethical principles of fairness, transparency, and accountability, which are foundational to professional supply management. Furthermore, by fostering integration, it supports the organization's ability to operate efficiently and effectively, a key tenet of responsible business practice. An approach that prioritizes one department's needs over others without thorough consideration of the broader impact is ethically flawed. It can lead to suboptimal outcomes, create interdepartmental friction, and undermine trust. Such an approach fails to uphold the principle of acting in the best interest of the organization as a whole. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with decisions without adequate consultation or information sharing. This demonstrates a lack of respect for the expertise and contributions of other departments, leading to potential errors, missed opportunities, and resistance to implementation. Ethically, it violates principles of transparency and collaboration. Finally, an approach that relies solely on historical practices or the loudest voice in the room, without objective analysis or data-driven decision-making, is professionally unsound. It risks perpetuating inefficiencies and failing to adapt to changing business needs, which is contrary to the supply management professional's duty to drive continuous improvement and value. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes stakeholder engagement, clear communication, data-driven analysis, and alignment with organizational objectives. This involves actively listening to all perspectives, identifying common ground, and working towards consensus. When disagreements arise, a structured approach to problem solving, focusing on objective criteria and potential impacts, is crucial. Question 9. The risk matrix shows a high probability of customer dissatisfaction and potential product recalls if cost-saving measures are implemented without careful consideration of functional integrity. A supply manager is tasked with reducing the cost of a key component by 15% within the next quarter. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of value analysis and value engineering within a regulatory compliance framework? Option A. Inform the engineering department that the cost reduction target must be met by any means necessary, and they should redesign the component to use less expensive materials, regardless of potential performance impacts. Option B. Initiate a cross-functional value engineering workshop to identify opportunities for material substitution, design simplification, or process improvements that maintain or enhance essential product functions and quality, followed by rigorous testing and validation of any proposed changes. Option C. Immediately source a cheaper alternative material from a new supplier that meets the basic dimensional requirements, assuming it will perform adequately. Option D. Accept the lowest bid from existing suppliers for the current component specifications, even if it means accepting a slightly lower quality grade of material, to achieve the cost reduction. The correct answer is C. Immediately source a cheaper alternative material from a new supplier that meets the basic dimensional requirements, assuming it will perform adequately. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply management where cost reduction pressures might lead to compromising product quality or functionality. The professional challenge lies in balancing the imperative to reduce costs with the ethical and regulatory obligations to deliver products that meet specified standards and do not pose undue risks to end users or the environment. The risk matrix highlights potential negative outcomes, necessitating a careful and principled approach to value analysis and value engineering. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and collaborative process of value analysis and value engineering that prioritizes maintaining or improving essential functions and quality while identifying cost-saving opportunities. This aligns with the ethical principles of integrity and professional responsibility expected of supply management professionals. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit of regulations that mandate product safety, compliance with specifications, and fair dealing. By focusing on functional requirements and exploring alternative materials or processes that do not compromise performance or safety, supply manager upholds their duty to the organization and its stakeholders. This approach ensures that cost reductions are achieved through innovation and efficiency, rather than through the degradation of product value or the introduction of unacceptable risks. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing cost reductions by simply substituting lower-cost materials without rigorous testing or validation is a failure to uphold professional responsibility. This approach risks compromising product performance, durability, and safety, potentially leading to product failures, customer dissatisfaction, and legal liabilities. It also violates the principle of due diligence, which requires thorough investigation and verification of any proposed changes. Adopting a cost at all costs mentality that disregards the impact on product functionality or compliance with established standards is ethically unsound. This approach prioritizes short-term financial gains over long-term product integrity and customer trust, can lead to non-compliance with industry standards, and potentially violate consumer protection laws, which aim to ensure that products are fit for purpose and safe for use. Focusing solely on the lowest bid from a supplier without considering their ability to consistently meet quality specifications or their adherence to ethical business practices is also problematic. This can lead to a race to the bottom, where quality is sacrificed for price, ultimately undermining the value proposition and potentially exposing the organization to risks associated with unreliable suppliers. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should first clearly define the essential functions and performance requirements of the product. They should then engage cross-functional teams, including engineering, quality assurance, and marketing, in the value analysis and value engineering process. This collaborative approach ensures that all perspectives are considered and that potential risks are identified and mitigated. When evaluating cost-saving opportunities, a rigorous process of testing, validation, and risk assessment must be employed. Decisions should be based on objective data and a thorough understanding of the potential impact on product quality, safety, and customer satisfaction, always in alignment with ethical codes of conduct and relevant regulatory frameworks. Question 10. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new component for a critical piece of manufacturing equipment could be sourced more efficiently and with potentially greater reliability if suppliers are allowed to propose their own innovative solutions, provided they meet stringent operational uptime and output targets. Which type of specification would best facilitate this approach while ensuring the organization's core needs are met? Option A. Vendor qualification specification. Option B. Performance specification. Option C. Design specification. Option D. Combination specification. The correct answer is B. Performance specification. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply management, balancing the desire for innovation and supplier expertise with the need for clear, measurable requirements to ensure quality and cost-effectiveness. The professional challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate specification type that aligns with the organization's strategic goals, risk tolerance, and the nature of the product or service being procured. A failure to properly define specifications can lead to disputes, cost overruns, and ultimately, a failure to meet organizational needs. The correct approach involves selecting a performance specification. This approach is professionally sound because it focuses on the desired outcome or function of the product or service, rather than dictating the exact method of production. This allows suppliers to leverage their expertise and innovation to meet the defined performance criteria. In the context of the CPSM framework, this aligns with principles of effective sourcing and supplier relationship management, encouraging competition based on results and fostering a collaborative environment. It also supports ethical procurement by ensuring that the organization is procuring based on value and effectiveness, not on potentially restrictive or outdated design mandates. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on a design specification. This is professionally problematic because it limits supplier innovation and may not account for advancements in technology or alternative solutions that could achieve the same or better results at a lower cost. Ethically, it can lead to a less competitive bidding process and potentially favor suppliers with existing proprietary designs, which may not be in the best interest of the organization or its stakeholders. Another incorrect approach is to use a combination of design and performance specifications without clear delineation or prioritization. This can create ambiguity, making it difficult for suppliers to understand the primary requirements and for the organization to evaluate bids effectively. This ambiguity can lead to disputes over compliance and may result in the procurement of a product or service that meets some, but not all critical requirements, representing a failure in due diligence and potentially a breach of fiduciary responsibility to the organization. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the project's objectives, the market landscape, and the capabilities of potential suppliers. It requires an assessment of the risks associated with each specification type and a consideration of how each type will impact innovation, cost, and quality. The organization should then select the specification type that best balances these factors, ensuring clear communication of requirements to potential suppliers. Question 11. The evaluation methodology shows a potential supplier for critical components has provided documentation indicating compliance with all required quality standards and ethical labor practices, but has not undergone an independent third-party audit for these claims. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory compliance and professional supply management principles for supplier qualification? Option A. Proceed with the supplier based on their self-certification, as the documentation appears complete and meets initial requirements. Option B. Engage the supplier based on a long-standing personal relationship, bypassing the formal qualification process to expedite the sourcing. Option C. Conduct a thorough due diligence process, including independent verification of the supplier's claims regarding quality and ethical labor practices before final selection. Option D. Prioritize this supplier due to their competitive pricing, assuming their self-certification is sufficient to meet operational needs. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the supplier based on their self-certification, as the documentation appears complete and meets initial requirements. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical juncture in supply management, ensuring that potential suppliers meet established standards before engaging in business. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a systematic and objective approach to avoid bias, legal repercussion, and operational risks. Failing to properly qualify suppliers can lead to non-compliance with regulations, compromised product quality, supply chain disruptions, and reputational damage. The core of the challenge lies in balancing efficiency with thoroughness, ensuring that the qualification process is robust enough to mitigate risks without becoming an insurmountable barrier to sourcing. The correct approach involves a comprehensive due diligence process that aligns with the principles of responsible sourcing and ethical business conduct, as implicitly guided by general supply management, best practices, and regulatory expectations for corporate responsibility. This includes verifying a supplier's financial stability, operational capabilities, ethical practices, and compliance with relevant laws and standards. For instance, in the U.S. context, this might involve ensuring suppliers do not engage in forced labor or violate environmental regulations, which could expose the organization to legal liabilities and reputational harm. A structured approach, often involving questionnaires, site visits, and third-party verification, provides documented evidence of the supplier's suitability, thereby protecting the organization. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the supplier's self-reported information without independent verification is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the standard of reasonable care expected in supplier selection. It creates a significant risk of engaging with suppliers who may not meet critical operational, ethical, or legal requirements, potentially leading to breaches of contract, product recalls, or violations of laws such as the Sarbanes-Oxley Act (SOX), if financial reporting is compromised by a supplier's actions. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost savings above all else, neglecting to assess a supplier's capacity to meet quality standards or adhere to ethical labor practices, is also professionally flawed. This can lead to the procurement of substandard goods or services, increased warranty claims, and potential violations of labor laws or industry-specific regulations. Such a focus on short-term cost reduction ignores the long-term risks and potential liabilities associated with unqualified suppliers. A third incorrect approach that involves selecting suppliers based on personal relationships or past familiarity without a formal qualification process is highly problematic. This introduces bias and bypasses objective assessment criteria, increasing the likelihood of selecting an unsuitable supplier. It undermines the integrity of the procurement process and can lead to the same risks as the other incorrect approaches, including legal and ethical breaches, as it lacks the documented evidence of due diligence required for good corporate governance. The professional decision-making process for such situations should involve establishing clear, objective qualification criteria aligned with the organization's strategic goals, risk appetite, and regulatory obligations. This process should be documented, consistently applied, and involve cross-functional input. When evaluating potential suppliers, professionals should prioritize evidence-based assessment over assumptions or personal preferences, ensuring that all critical areas, including financial health, operational capacity, quality control, ethical conduct, and legal compliance, are thoroughly investigated. Question 12. Operational review demonstrates that a key supplier, with whom your organization has a significant contract, has offered your procurement manager a substantial personal benefit, such as an all-expenses-paid luxury vacation, following a successful contract renewal negotiation. This offer is presented as a gesture of appreciation for the continued business. Option A. Accept the offer, as it is a significant gesture of appreciation from a valued supplier and represents a common practice in some industries. Option B. Politely decline the offer, citing company policy and the importance of maintaining an objective and fair supplier relationship, and reaffirm commitment to evaluating suppliers based on merit. Option C. Accept the offer but immediately disclose it to your direct supervisor, believing that transparency will mitigate any ethical concerns. Option D. Accept the offer and argue that it is a small token of appreciation that will not influence future decisions, and that declining it might damage the supplier relationship. The correct answer is B. Politely decline the offer, citing company policy and the importance of maintaining an objective and fair supplier relationship, and reaffirm commitment to evaluating suppliers based on merit. Explanation. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in supply management, where a supplier offers a significant benefit that could influence purchasing decisions. The challenge lies in balancing the desire to foster strong supplier relationships and potentially gain cost advantages with the imperative to maintain objectivity and fairness in procurement processes. Adherence to ethical standards and internal policies is paramount to avoid conflicts of interest and ensure the integrity of the supply chain. The correct approach involves politely declining the offer while reinforcing the company's commitment to fair and objective supplier evaluation. This upholds the principles of ethical conduct and competitive advantage by ensuring that supplier selection is based solely on merit, quality, price, and service, rather than personal inducements. This aligns with the foundational ethical principles expected of supply management professionals, which emphasize honesty, integrity, and fairness in all dealings. By refusing the gift, professional avoids any appearance of impropriety and maintains the trust of other suppliers and stakeholders. An incorrect approach would be to accept the offer. This creates a direct conflict of interest, as the professional's judgment could be compromised by the personal benefit received. It violates ethical codes that prohibit accepting gifts that could influence business decisions and undermines the competitive advantage derived from a fair and transparent supplier selection process. Other suppliers would be disadvantaged, and the company could be perceived as engaging in unethical practices, damaging its reputation. Another incorrect approach is to accept the offer but disclose it to management. While disclosure is a step towards transparency, accepting the offer itself is problematic. The mere acceptance, even with disclosure, can still create an appearance of impropriety and may not fully mitigate the conflict of interest. The ethical failure lies in allowing the potential for influence to exist in the first place, rather than proactively preventing it. A further incorrect approach is to accept the offer and argue that it is a standard industry practice or a small token of appreciation. While some gifts might be considered customary, the significant value of the offer in this scenario suggests it goes beyond a minor gesture. Relying on industry practice as justification for a potentially unethical act is a failure to apply sound ethical judgment and can lead to a slippery slope of increasingly questionable behavior, eroding the competitive advantage gained through ethical sourcing. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical considerations and adherence to established policies. This involves 1. Identifying the potential ethical conflict. 2. Consulting company policies and ethical codes of conduct. 3. Evaluating the nature and value of the offer in relation to potential influence. 4. Prioritizing the company's integrity and fair competition over personal gain or immediate supplier appeasement. 5. Communicating clearly and professionally, adhering to ethical guidelines. Question 13. The evaluation methodology shows that the supply management team has a clear understanding of the desired outcome for a new software system implementation, including specific functional requirements and integration needs. However, the team is also seeking innovative approaches to system architecture and user interface design from potential vendors, and anticipates a need to negotiate detailed service-level agreements and implementation timelines. Which solicitation document is most appropriate for this scenario? Option A, Request for Proposal RFP. Option B, Request for Information RFI. Option C, Request for Quotation RFQ. Option D, Request for Tender RFT. The correct answer is A, Request for Proposal RFP. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply management, selecting the most appropriate solicitation document for a given procurement need. The professional challenge lies in accurately assessing the level of detail and specificity required from potential suppliers to make an informed decision, while also adhering to ethical and regulatory principles of fairness and transparency. Misjudging the solicitation type can lead to inefficient processes, inadequate supplier responses, and potential disputes, undermining the integrity of the procurement. The correct approach involves issuing a request for proposal, RFP, when the organization has a clear understanding of the problem or need, but requires innovative solutions and detailed proposals from suppliers. This method allows for a comprehensive evaluation of technical capabilities, management approaches, and pricing, enabling a best value determination. This aligns with the principles of responsible procurement, ensuring that the chosen supplier can best meet the organization's objectives. The regulatory framework for supply management emphasizes fairness, transparency, and obtaining the best value, all of which are facilitated by using an RFP when seeking complex solutions. An incorrect approach would be to issue a request for information RFI when the organization has a well-defined scope and is seeking specific pricing and delivery terms. An RFI is designed for gathering general information and understanding market capabilities, not for soliciting binding offers. Using an RFI in this context would be misleading to suppliers, waste their time and resources, and fail to provide the necessary data for a definitive selection. This violates the ethical principle of providing clear and accurate information to potential partners. Another incorrect approach would be to issue a request for quotation, RFQ, when the organization has a need for a custom-developed solution with significant technical and service components, rather than a standard product with readily available pricing. An RFQ is best suited for procurements where specifications are clearly defined, and the primary evaluation criterion is price. Using an RFQ for a complex, solution-oriented requirement would likely result in superficial or inadequate responses that do not address the nuanced needs of the organization, leading to a suboptimal outcome and potentially violating the duty to obtain the best value. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a thorough analysis of the procurement objective. Is the goal to gather broad market intelligence, RFI, to obtain firm pricing for well-defined goods or services, RFQ, or to solicit detailed solutions and proposals for a complex need where technical merit and overall value are paramount, RFP. Once the objective is clear, the appropriate solicitation document can be selected, ensuring that the process is fair, transparent, and designed to achieve the best possible outcome for the organization, in accordance with established supply management principles and any applicable regulations. Question 14. Stakeholder feedback indicates a desire to reduce immediate expenditure on a critical component, with some advocating for selecting the supplier offering the lowest upfront price. However, the supply management team has identified that this component has significant operational and maintenance costs throughout its life cycle. Considering the principles of value creation and total cost of ownership, TCO, within the U.S. regulatory and ethical framework for supply management, which approach best aligns with the organization's long-term interests. Option A. Rely solely on historical purchasing data for this component to determine the most cost-effective supplier, without further market research or life cycle cost evaluation. Option B. Prioritize suppliers with whom the organization has had long-standing positive relationships, assuming their offerings represent good value regardless of detailed cost analysis. Option C. Select the supplier with the lowest initial purchase price to immediately address stakeholder concerns about reducing expenditure. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive total cost of ownership, TCO, analysis, evaluating all direct and indirect costs associated with each supplier's offering over the component's life cycle, and present findings to stakeholders to justify a decision based on overall value. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive total cost of ownership, TCO, analysis, evaluating all direct and indirect costs associated with each supplier's offering over the component's life cycle, and present findings to stakeholders to justify a decision based on overall value. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing competing stakeholder interests and understanding the broader implications of procurement decisions beyond the initial purchase price. The core of the challenge lies in moving from a transactional view of cost to a strategic view of total cost of ownership, TCO, which is a fundamental principle in supply management. Professionals must demonstrate an understanding of how various cost elements, both direct and indirect, impact the overall value delivered by a supplier and their products or services. This requires analytical skills, communication, and the ability to influence decision-making based on a comprehensive understanding of value creation. The correct approach involves a holistic assessment of TCO, considering all relevant costs throughout the life cycle of a product or service. This includes acquisition costs, operating costs, maintenance, support, and disposal costs. By focusing on TCO, a supply management professional demonstrates a commitment to maximizing value for the organization, aligning with ethical principles of responsible resource allocation and long-term strategic benefit. This approach is supported by the foundational principles of supply management, which emphasize creating value and achieving organizational objectives through effective sourcing and supplier relationship management. While specific U.S. regulations might not directly mandate TCO calculations, the ethical framework and professional standards of supply management, as often embodied in professional certifications like CPSM, strongly advocate for this comprehensive cost evaluation as a best practice for achieving organizational goals and demonstrating fiduciary responsibility. An approach that solely focuses on the lowest initial purchase price is professionally unacceptable because it ignores significant downstream costs and potential risks. This narrow focus can lead to higher overall expenses, reduced quality, and decreased operational efficiency, ultimately failing to create optimal value for the organization. Ethically, it can be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence and to act in the best long-term interest of the employer. An approach that prioritizes supplier relationships without a clear link to TCO or value creation is also problematic. While strong supplier relationships are important, they should be built on a foundation of mutual benefit and demonstrable value. Prioritizing relationships over cost-effectiveness and value can lead to suboptimal outcomes and may not align with the organization's financial objectives. This can also raise ethical questions if it appears to favor certain suppliers without objective justification. An approach that relies solely on historical purchasing data without considering current market conditions or future needs is also flawed. While historical data is useful, it does not account for evolving technologies, changing market dynamics, or shifts in organizational strategy. This can result in missed opportunities for cost savings or value enhancement and may not reflect the most advantageous TCO. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Clearly defining the scope of the procurement and identifying all relevant cost drivers across the life cycle. 2. Engaging with stakeholders to understand their needs and concerns related to cost, quality, and performance. 3. Conducting a thorough TCO analysis, quantifying all relevant cost elements. 4. Evaluating potential suppliers based on their ability to meet TCO objectives and contribute to overall value creation. 5. Communicating the TCO findings and recommendations clearly to stakeholders, justifying the chosen approach based on comprehensive analysis and alignment with organizational goals. Question 15. What factors determine the most effective strategy for implementing sustainability and ethical sourcing practices across a global supply chain, considering varying supplier capabilities and regulatory landscapes? Option A. Imposing a uniform set of sustainability and ethical sourcing requirements on all suppliers without regard for their operational context or capacity. Option B. Relying solely on supplier self-declarations and immediate implementation of the most stringent ethical sourcing standards across all partners. Option C. A comprehensive risk assessment of the supply chain, coupled with a phased, collaborative approach to supplier engagement and continuous monitoring. Option D. Prioritizing cost reduction in supplier selection, with sustainability and ethical considerations being secondary to price. Correct answer is C. A comprehensive risk assessment of the supply chain, coupled with a phased, collaborative approach to supplier engagement and continuous monitoring. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in supply management, balancing the imperative for sustainability and ethical sourcing with the practical realities of global supply chains. Organizations are increasingly pressured by stakeholders, regulators, and consumers to demonstrate responsible practices. However, verifying compliance across diverse suppliers, many of whom may operate in regions with varying legal frameworks and enforcement mechanisms, is complex and resource-intensive. The challenge lies in developing and executing a strategy that is both effective in achieving sustainability goals and compliant with relevant regulations, while also being economically viable and operationally feasible. This requires a nuanced understanding of supplier capabilities, risk assessment, and the ability to foster collaboration rather than simply imposing mandates. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that prioritizes supplier engagement, risk assessment, and continuous improvement, grounded in established ethical sourcing principles and relevant regulatory expectations. This approach recognizes that achieving sustainability and ethical sourcing is an ongoing journey, not a one-time audit. It emphasizes building strong relationships with suppliers, providing them with the necessary training and resources to meet standards, and conducting thorough risk assessments to identify potential areas of noncompliance. Regular monitoring and auditing, coupled with a clear grievance mechanism and corrective action plan, are crucial for ensuring accountability and driving positive change. This aligns with the foundational principles of responsible supply chain management, which are increasingly codified in voluntary industry standards and, in some jurisdictions, in specific legislation related to due diligence and transparency. The focus is on proactive risk management and fostering a culture of ethical conduct throughout the supply chain. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely rely on self-declarations from suppliers without independent verification. This fails to acknowledge the inherent risk of misrepresentation or lack of understanding on the part of the supplier. Ethically, it abdicates the organization's responsibility to ensure its supply chain is free from unethical practices. Legally, in jurisdictions with due diligence requirements, this approach could lead to significant liability if issues arise. Another incorrect approach is to impose stringent, one-size-fits-all ethical sourcing requirements on all suppliers immediately, without considering their capacity or the specific risks associated with their operations. This can alienate suppliers, disrupt supply chains, and be economically unfeasible. While the intent might be good, the lack of a phased, risk-based implementation demonstrates a failure to apply professional judgment and a lack of understanding of practical supply chain dynamics. It also overlooks the importance of collaboration and capacity building, which are often more effective in achieving long-term ethical sourcing goals. A third incorrect approach is to focus exclusively on cost reduction, without integrating sustainability and ethical considerations into the sourcing decision-making process. This directly contradicts the principles of responsible supply chain management and can lead to the selection of suppliers who engage in exploitative labor practices or environmentally damaging activities. This approach prioritizes short-term financial gains over long-term ethical and reputational risks and can lead to significant legal and brand damage. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach sustainability and ethical sourcing implementation by first conducting a comprehensive risk assessment of their supply chain, identifying high-risk suppliers and commodities. This should be followed by developing clear, measurable ethical sourcing policies and standards that are communicated effectively to all suppliers. A tiered approach to supplier engagement, focusing on collaboration, capacity building, and phased implementation of requirements based on risk, is essential. Establishing robust monitoring and auditing mechanisms, including grievance procedures and corrective action plans, ensures accountability. Professionals must also stay informed about evolving regulatory landscapes and industry best practices to ensure ongoing compliance and continuous improvement. The decision-making process should be guided by a commitment to transparency, fairness, and long-term value creation, rather than solely on immediate cost savings. Question 16. Examination of the data shows that a critical project requires the acquisition of specialized software development services. The project's requirements are detailed and well documented, and the market for such services is competitive, with established pricing structures. The organization is seeking to maximize cost certainty and minimize financial exposure to potential scope changes or unforeseen technical challenges. Which contract type would be most appropriate to achieve these objectives? Option A, fixed price contract. Option B, incentive fee contract. Option C, cost reimbursement contract. Option D, time and materials contract. Correct answer is A, fixed price contract. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the supply management professional to balance the need for cost control with the inherent risks associated with different contract types. The choice of contract type significantly impacts the allocation of risk between the buyer and seller, and selecting the wrong type can lead to cost overruns, disputes, or a failure to meet project objectives. Careful judgment is required to align the contract type with the project's scope definition, risk profile, and the organization's risk tolerance. The correct approach involves selecting a fixed-price contract when the scope of work is well-defined and the risks are understood and can be reasonably estimated. This approach is justified by the principle of efficient resource allocation and risk management. Fixed-price contracts provide cost certainty for the buyer and incentivize the seller to manage costs effectively, aligning with the foundational principles of supply management to achieve value for money. In the context of the CPSM framework, this aligns with the emphasis on strategic sourcing and contract management to achieve organizational objectives. An incorrect approach would be to select a cost reimbursement contract when the scope is clearly defined and stable. This is ethically problematic, as it shifts a significant portion of the financial risk to the buyer without a clear justification, potentially leading to inflated costs and inefficient performance by the seller. It fails to uphold the professional responsibility to act in the best interest of the organization by not seeking the most cost-effective solution. Another incorrect approach would be to choose a time and materials contract for a project with a high degree of uncertainty and potential for scope creep. While this contract type offers flexibility, it can lead to unpredictable costs for the buyer and may not adequately incentivize the seller to control labor hours or material usage, thereby failing to manage risk effectively and potentially violating the principle of prudent financial management. A further incorrect approach would be to opt for an incentive fee contract without clearly defined performance metrics. This dilutes the intended benefit of incentivizing performance, as the seller may not be clearly motivated to achieve specific outcomes, leading to a suboptimal outcome for the buyer, and a failure to leverage the contract type's potential for risk mitigation and performance enhancement. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment of the project, including the clarity of the scope, the predictability of costs, and the potential for unforeseen issues. This assessment should then be mapped against the characteristics and risk profiles of various contract types. The supply management professional must consider the organization's risk appetite and strategic objectives to select the contract type that best aligns with these factors, ensuring both cost control and successful project execution. Question 17. When evaluating the financial impact of supply management initiatives, which approach best distinguishes between actual reductions in current expenditure and the prevention of future expenditure, ensuring accurate financial reporting and strategic alignment? Option A. Focusing exclusively on cost avoidance by estimating future expenditures that have been prevented without necessarily quantifying current spending reductions. Option B. Emphasizing short-term, easily achievable reductions in immediate spending without detailed analysis of long-term implications or projected future costs. Option C. Prioritizing the quantification of cost avoidance by projecting potential future expenses that have been successfully mitigated, alongside the clear measurement of immediate reductions in current spending. Option D. Measuring cost avoidance by simply noting instances where negotiated prices are lower than initial supplier quotes, regardless of a defined baseline of what would have been spent. The correct answer is C. Prioritizing the quantification of cost avoidance by projecting potential future expenses that have been successfully mitigated, alongside the clear measurement of immediate reductions in current spending. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply management, distinguishing between true cost savings and perceived cost avoidance, and ensuring that the chosen metric accurately reflects the organization's financial performance and strategic goals. The CPSM framework emphasizes the importance of understanding financial impacts and making informed decisions that benefit the organization. The challenge lies in the subtle but critical difference between reducing current expenditure savings and preventing future expenditure avoidance, and how these are reported and measured. Professional judgment is required to select the most appropriate evaluation method that aligns with established accounting principles and ethical reporting standards. The correct approach involves a clear definition and consistent application of cost savings and cost avoidance metrics, ensuring that the chosen method aligns with generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, and the organization's financial reporting standards. This approach prioritizes transparency and accuracy in financial reporting, which is a cornerstone of ethical supply management practice. By focusing on measurable reductions in current spending, cost savings provide a direct and verifiable impact on the bottom line. Cost avoidance, while valuable, requires a more nuanced justification based on projected future expenditures that have been successfully mitigated. The CPSM framework encourages a rigorous approach to financial analysis, ensuring that all reported figures are defensible and contribute to sound business decisions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost avoidance, without clear, quantifiable projections of avoided costs, fails to provide a transparent and verifiable measure of financial benefit. This can lead to inflated performance metrics and misinformed strategic decisions. Ethically, misrepresenting potential future savings as realized savings is misleading. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes short-term, superficial reductions without considering the total cost of ownership or potential long-term consequences overlooks critical supply chain dynamics. This can result in hidden costs, reduced quality, or supply disruption, ultimately undermining the organization's financial health and strategic objectives. Such an approach neglects the ethical responsibility to act in the best long-term interest of the organization. A third incorrect approach that conflates cost avoidance with mere negotiation tactics, without a clear baseline of what would have been spent otherwise, lacks the rigor required for accurate financial assessment. This approach can lead to a subjective and unverified assessment of value, potentially masking inefficiencies or failing to capture true opportunities for improvement. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured approach. First, clearly define the objectives. Are we aiming to reduce current expenses or prevent future ones? Second, establish clear, measurable criteria for both cost savings and cost avoidance, ensuring these align with organizational financial policies and GAAP. Third, gather data to support the chosen metric, ensuring it is verifiable and defensible. Fourth, communicate the chosen methodology and results transparently to stakeholders, explaining the distinction between savings and avoidance. Finally, regularly review and refine the evaluation process to ensure its continued accuracy and relevance. Question 18. The risk matrix shows a high probability of competitive disadvantage if a new product is not launched within the next 18 months. Your team is exploring innovative solutions with potential suppliers. Which approach best balances the urgency for innovation with ethical and legal considerations in new product development? Option A. Proactively engage potential suppliers early in the product development process, establishing clear intellectual property agreements and non-disclosure agreements before sharing sensitive design concepts. Option B. Leverage existing supplier relationships to solicit innovative ideas, with the intention of formalizing intellectual property and compensation terms only after the core concept is validated. Option C. Independently develop a product concept based on publicly available competitor information and then approach suppliers for manufacturing bids, prioritizing speed to market. Option D. Solicit bids for manufacturing a novel product concept from multiple suppliers without disclosing the proprietary nature of the design or the innovative aspects of the concept. Correct answer is A. Proactively engage potential suppliers early in the product development process, establishing clear intellectual property agreements and non-disclosure agreements before sharing sensitive design concepts. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the pursuit of innovation with the ethical and regulatory obligations of supply management. The pressure to be first to market with a new product can lead to shortcuts that compromise intellectual property rights, fair competition, and supplier relationships. Supply managers must navigate these complexities by adhering to established ethical codes and legal frameworks, ensuring that innovation efforts are conducted responsibly and sustainably. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively engaging with potential suppliers early in the product development lifecycle to explore collaborative innovation opportunities. This includes establishing clear intellectual property agreements, non-disclosure agreements, and fair compensation terms before any sensitive information is shared. This method aligns with the ethical principles of integrity, fairness, and respect for intellectual property, as promoted by professional supply management organizations. It fosters trust and transparency with suppliers, which is crucial for long-term partnerships and successful new product introduction. By involving suppliers early and defining terms upfront, the organization mitigates risks associated with IP infringement and ensures a more equitable distribution of benefits derived from the innovation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to leverage existing supplier relationships to solicit innovative ideas without formal agreements, intending to finalize terms later. This poses a significant ethical failure by potentially infringing on the supplier's intellectual property rights and demonstrating a lack of integrity. It can lead to disputes, legal challenges, and damage to the organization's reputation. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed to market by independently developing a product based on publicly available competitor information, then approaching suppliers for manufacturing. This can lead to accusations of patent infringement or trade secret misappropriation, violating principles of fair competition and intellectual property respect. A third incorrect approach is to solicit bids for manufacturing a novel product concept without disclosing the innovative nature or the proprietary aspects of the design to potential suppliers. This lacks transparency and could lead to suppliers unknowingly participating in the exploitation of intellectual property, creating ethical and legal liabilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured approach to innovation and new product development that prioritizes ethical conduct and legal compliance. This involves 1. Early identification of innovation needs and potential areas for collaboration. 2. Conducting thorough due diligence on intellectual property considerations and potential risks. 3. Engaging potential partners with clear communication and establishing robust legal agreements, NDA, IP licenses, etc., before sharing sensitive information. 4. Ensuring fair and transparent dealings with all stakeholders, including suppliers. 5. Continuously monitoring for compliance with ethical codes and relevant regulations throughout the development process. Question 19. Governance review demonstrates a need to reduce supply chain operating costs. A supply management team is tasked with identifying opportunities for significant cost savings. Which of the following approaches best balances cost reduction with supply chain resilience and ethical considerations? Option A. Immediately consolidate spend with the lowest cost suppliers identified through a simple bid analysis, regardless of their operational capacity or market position. Option B. Negotiate extended payment terms with all suppliers, prioritizing those offering the most favorable cash flow benefits to the organization. Option C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of critical suppliers, evaluating their financial health, geopolitical exposure, and operational capabilities to inform sourcing decisions and develop contingency plans. Option D. Implement a mandatory 20% reduction in the number of active suppliers across all categories to streamline procurement processes and reduce administrative overhead. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of critical suppliers, evaluating their financial health, geopolitical exposure, and operational capabilities to inform sourcing decisions and develop contingency plans. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for cost reduction with the long-term strategic imperative of supply chain resilience. A purely cost-driven approach can inadvertently increase supply chain vulnerability, leading to greater financial and operational risks down the line. The challenge lies in identifying and mitigating these risks within the foundational principles of supply management, ensuring that decisions align with organizational objectives and ethical considerations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that quantifies potential disruptions and their impact on the organization. This aligns with the foundational principles of supply management, which emphasize proactive risk mitigation and strategic sourcing. By identifying critical suppliers and assessing their financial stability, geopolitical exposure, and operational capabilities, the organization can develop contingency plans and explore alternative sourcing strategies. This proactive stance is ethically sound as it protects the organization's stakeholders, including employees, customers, and shareholders, from the adverse effects of supply chain disruptions. It also adheres to the principles of responsible supply chain management, which are increasingly embedded in regulatory expectations and industry best practices, even if not explicitly codified in a single U.S. regulation for this foundational level. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on the lowest bid without considering supplier risk is an ethically questionable approach. It prioritizes short-term cost savings over long-term stability and can lead to a failure to uphold contractual obligations if a low-cost, high-risk supplier falters. This neglects the fundamental duty of care in supply management. Implementing a blanket reduction in supplier numbers without a thorough analysis of the impact on supply chain diversity and resilience, also problematic. This can create single points of failure and increase dependence on remaining suppliers, thereby amplifying risk. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and strategic foresight. Prioritizing suppliers with the most aggressive payment terms, while seemingly beneficial for cash flow, can strain supplier relationships and potentially lead to a reduction in supplier commitment or quality. This approach can inadvertently create adversarial relationships and undermine the collaborative partnerships essential for a robust supply chain. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured risk management framework. This involves identifying potential risks, assessing their likelihood and impact, developing mitigation strategies, and continuously monitoring the supply chain. Decisions should be data-driven, considering both cost and risk factors, and aligned with the organization's overall strategic goals and ethical standards. A thorough understanding of the supply chain's interdependencies and potential vulnerabilities is crucial for making informed and responsible decisions. Question 20. Regulatory review indicates that a supply manager is tasked with conducting a comprehensive market analysis for a new component. To gain a competitive edge, the manager is considering several methods to understand supplier pricing and capabilities. Which of the following approaches best aligns with ethical and regulatory expectations for market analysis in supply management? Option A. Engaging in discussions with a supplier's former employee to gather insights into their current pricing strategies and production costs, without disclosing the source of this information to other potential suppliers. Option B. Analyzing publicly available financial reports, industry trend analyses, and conducting structured, transparent requests for information (RFI) and proposals (RFP) with clear objectives. Option C. Requesting detailed cost breakdowns and proprietary process information from potential suppliers during the initial stages of supplier engagement, emphasizing the need for transparency to ensure fair pricing. Option D. Relying on informal conversations with industry peers and anecdotal evidence shared at trade shows to infer market pricing and supplier capacities. The correct answer is C. Requesting detailed cost breakdowns and proprietary process information from potential suppliers during the initial stages of supplier engagement, emphasizing the need for transparency to ensure fair pricing. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a supply manager to balance the need for comprehensive market intelligence with the ethical and regulatory obligations regarding the use of proprietary information. The CPSM framework emphasizes ethical conduct and compliance with relevant laws and guidelines. A deep understanding of market analysis and supply market research is crucial, but the methods employed must be beyond reproach. The correct approach involves leveraging publicly available data, industry reports, and direct, transparent engagement with potential suppliers. This aligns with ethical principles of fair competition and respect for intellectual property. Regulatory frameworks, particularly those governing fair business practices and antitrust laws, though not explicitly detailed in CPSM Module 1, the underlying principles of fair dealing are implicit, would support methods that do not involve deception or the acquisition of confidential information through illicit means. The CPSM Code of Ethics also mandates integrity and honesty in all business dealings. An incorrect approach that involves attempting to obtain a competitor's pricing information through misrepresentation or by soliciting confidential data from a supplier's employees without proper authorization is ethically unsound and potentially illegal. Such actions violate principles of fair competition and could lead to legal repercussions for both the individual and the organization. Furthermore, it undermines trust within the supply chain and damages the organization's reputation. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on anecdotal evidence or rumors from informal networks, lacks the rigor required for effective market analysis and can lead to flawed strategic decisions. While informal insights can sometimes be a starting point, they do not constitute robust research and can be biased or inaccurate, failing to meet the professional standard of due diligence expected in supply management. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of research methodologies. Professionals should prioritize methods that are transparent, ethical, and legally compliant. This includes clearly defining research objectives, identifying reliable data sources, and adhering to established ethical guidelines for information gathering. When in doubt, seeking guidance from legal counsel or senior management is advisable to ensure compliance and uphold professional integrity.